Hello and welcome to my cake kitchen. Today we're making this beginner friendly vase cake and I'll be taking you through all the steps you'll need to complete a cake like this, especially if you're a beginner looking to make a spectacular looking cake with very minimal skill. This cake is so beginner friendly. The entire cake was carved out of a stale scrap cake used in a tutorial for demonstrating how to use edible paper, also known as icing sheet, on a cake. This cake goes through quite the transformation to becoming what is now an elegantly presented hand-carved flower vase cake. So if you'd like to know how I did it with more tips to help you make the same cake, keep watching. To start with, this is a list of everything you'll need to make this cake with a bit of imagination to match. You'll see me utilize everything listed here in the process and I'll be explaining that in detail for you to understand. So a little bit of background about this cake, which as mentioned earlier was used in a live tutorial to demonstrate how to make a well-presented cake with simplistic design details using edible icing sheets. The tutorial is up here for you to check out on the channel, but after the tutorial I saved the cake for other tutorials that never happened until now. With my leftover cakes piling up in my fridge, I was looking to discard this cake, but first I thought I'd make something pretty. If you're a beginner looking to make a similar cake, you will need a well-stacked cake of about 6 layers standing at about 9 to 10 inches tall. The cake I'm using here is 7 inches in diameter, but a 6-inch cake standing at 9 to 10 inches tall will probably yield the same results. The cake will have to be kept chilled before carving. I have a video covering the basics of cake decorating linked in the description box, showing you how to fill and stack a cake correctly before undertaking this carving process. For this cake though, carving starts by carefully removing all the layers of decorative detail, which includes the moisture soaked edible paper and the layers of buttercream. I do this by using a sharp kitchen knife with the blade dipped in hot water, which aids removing the layers easily and cleanly. With the cake now exposed and taking shape, my workspace is cleared and I'm back to refining the details of my carved vase cake. A question on why I chose a vase cake is simply because I was thinking about Valentine's Day and thought about a tutorial that would be appropriate for the season and yet simplistic to make, whilst also lending to the idea that I have a scrap cake to dispose of and need minimal skill to turn it around. Now, any carved cake starts with a representation of the idea or the actual item in some form, whether in photo form or having the actual item to hand. And on the screen is the original idea I chose, but eventually changed my mind and adjusted to what we have now. I'll be explaining why I did that as the video develops. For now, I'm happy with the shape of the cake achieved here and I'll be leaving this to chill before the next phase. Next, the cake is brought back to be ganached by first applying the first layer of ganache as crumb coat to seal in all the crumbs. This cake is to be completed as a rustic ganache cake with an unpolished look to it, making it beginner friendly. And back to why I changed from the original idea of the cake earlier. I realized quickly during the decorating process representing this cake in that form would require it to be a fondant cake to show the polished jewel colored marble look which is shown in the photo, and that was going to be slightly unattainable for any beginner as fondant work can be difficult to achieve. Hence I decided to settle for a rustic looking cake which, although unpolished, lends to the clay-like pottery finish. After all, vases come in all sorts of forms and the photo on screen was my next inspiration. Following the crumb coat, more layers of ganache was applied to the cake using an offset spatula and any excess taken off using a flexi smoother. This part of the cake decorating process was very repetitive, adding and taking away ganache whilst looking to fill the surface of the cake to look even. If you'd like to see the full tutorial unedited, which was completed on a live, I'll link that in the description box for you to check out. With the vase cake now taking shape, it's time to mold the lip of the cake, which I am doing here using some ganache. This part could have been done by adding some fondant, but I'm committed to the clay-like pottery look of the cake, so with some gloves on, as you can see here, I am adding, smoothing and layering the ganache to create the lip. Worth noting, the consistency of ganache here lent to my cake goals, which is a ratio of 4:1, meaning for every 400 grams of white chocolate I added 100 ml of cream. The subject of ganache and how I make mine has been covered in a series of shorts videos, some of which I have linked in the description box for you. To mold the lip of the vase, bits of ganache is added in layers to form a lump which is then molded into shape. I must mention though, this part of the decorating process takes time to form, and to make things easier I use my hands for the molding. There are specific tools to help with this part, but for a beginner your hands are perhaps your best tool. With the vase and lip now taking form, pink colored ganache is now added to create some dimension, texture and highlight. There's no rhyme or reason to this except for wanting to add a bit of color as highlight. Once rubbed into the surface of the vase, much of the pink is taken out with a flexi smoother to create a not so uniform look, and the cake at this point is left to chill completely. Work now begins on the cake board over which the vase will be displayed, and the details of how I cover the cake board is covered in detail in the live tutorial, which I completely encourage you to watch. The cake after chilling is brought back to be decorated, and for this part of the decorating process to continue successfully, the cake surface has to be completely set. The ganache consistency used is helpful for this to be achieved, and once tested and certain the surface is set, the lip of the vase, which is also set now, is polished off slightly before painting is done. Worth mentioning, the painting was an impulsive decision to bring some dimension to the vase, since the pink and teal color looked flat to begin with, and for the painting to be undertaken, gold lasted dust is mixed into rejuvenated liquid to form some sort of edible paint. This is then stippled tediously on the surface of the cake before rubbed together with my palm. It's important to note, for every action undertaken with this cake, the intention isn't to create perfection but to add texture and dimension to the vase. Again, there's no particular way to do this, and my actions aren't very strict, but after what feels like a very long time, the painting comes together and it looks like the vase is taking shape too. Painting is done and the cake is moved to set. Next is the flowers. I have a selection of artificial flowers that will be put together as a bouquet. I chose these floral selection because they are easy to put together with stalks that could be moved around to make for an easy arrangement, especially if you're a beginner. If you want to see a slowed down version of the arrangement process, you would find that in the live tutorial that is linked in the description box for you. A tip for handling artificial flowers is to make them food safe by first disinfecting them. This can be achieved by spraying some strong alcohol or vinegar over them and throwing them into an oven at a very low heat to dry them off. To create a food safe barrier, a floral tape is used to secure the stalk together, and a wire cutter is used to snap off any excess wire. The flowers will then be inserted into the vase through a straw dowel, serving as a barrier between the taped floral stalk and the cake. Before settling for artificial flowers, I had considered the possibility of actual real flowers, but for beginners those would have been very tricky and difficult to put together, as they require different practices and techniques to safely secure them and introduce them onto a cake. Showing on screen here is the straw dowel, which will first be inserted into the cake before the flowers are planted into the cake through the straw. With our flowers now done and the bouquet formed, it's time to get our cake assembled for decoration. Our cake is now transferred from work surface to display board, where the cake is finally presented. A straw dowel is first inserted into the middle of the cake before the bouquet flowers are planted through the straw into the cake. Once inserted, the flowers are moved around to create some sort of movement so they don't look so flat, and filler flowers are added to bring some dimension to the flowers as well. The entire process again is part of the live tutorial that is up on the live format of the channel, and it's also linked in the description box for you. This cake was filmed with Valentine in mind, which is now past, but would make a lovely present for Mother's Day and a gift for a loved one as well. Needless to say, this cake is a great gift for any occasion, and if you love cake and flowers, this is probably killing two birds with one stone.